Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as we plant up what I call the Blue Fescue garden. So let's go. We're on the north side of my house, and honestly, many of the garden beds that I've created in my backyard are not full. They don't really have anything in them, and I'm just taking the opportunity to fill up each bed little by little. I recently planted these Blue Fescue back here. I've seen on the internet that planting blue fescue in mass looks really pretty, so I wanted to experiment with that. And so far, I like how it looks. What I was thinking was I wanted to add a ground cover at the base of the blue fescue. I don't want it to be anything very tall. So what I'm thinking of doing is adding some creeping jenny to the base of the blue fescue. I feel like the color of the creeping jenny would really stand out in this back garden because it tends to be on the darker side. I'm going to show you where I'm going to be getting the creeping jenny from. If you've watched some of my previous videos, I showed you how I made some window boxes and hanging baskets using creeping jenny. And I pulled the creeping jenny from my vegetable garden. The remaining creeping jenny that I have to play with is down in this section of this raised bed, as well as in this section over here. I'm working hard to get rid of the creeping jenny because it really should not be in this raised vegetable garden. So I'm going to go ahead and dig a bunch out, and then we're going to get planting. When it comes to ground covers, there are a lot of different options. The main thing to keep in mind when planting a ground cover is to think of its name. The purpose of a plant that's called a ground cover is to do its job, which is cover the ground. So you don't want to plant a ground cover in a flower bed where you don't want this plant to take over, because it will. It wants to just keep crawling and moving around the bed and doing its job, which is to kind of cover this whole area. But I do want to have some ground cover in certain parts of my garden because it does suppress weeds, and in certain cases it can also help with controlling erosion. It looks great on an unused area like on a slope or a hill. There are a lot of proper applications for ground cover. When I was first learning to garden, I did make the rookie mistake of planting some ground cover. It was vinca, planting it in a small flower bed. You don't want to do that because you're constantly pulling it out then, unless you don't mind. If you don't mind constantly pulling out a ground cover in order to control it, then it's not a problem. In this area here, I really wanted to fill up this space. But the minute it starts crawling into nearby garden beds, I have no problem controlling it and pulling it out as needed. But what I also like is if I have all of this in one spot, like in this area here, I can take from it and use it in my hanging baskets, my window boxes, my container pots. That's a big reason why I grow this ground cover, is for that purpose. I really never had anywhere I could put it temporarily in the fall to overwinter, and that's why you found it in my vegetable garden. That is definitely not the best place to be overwintering that plant. And you can see why. It's middle of June and I still have that plant in the garden. I don't want it in the vegetable garden anymore. So I figured it would look great out here. It won't get very tall. It'll never get taller than this blue fescue. And the color will really pop in this dark corner of my garden. Some of the other ground covers that I considered for this area were ajuga and vinca. I did not want to use ajuga because I felt that it might get a little too tall compared to the blue fescue grass. And that's the whole reason I didn't want to use that here. And when it comes to the vinca, I do have vinca in a different part of my gardens. So I wanted to do something different. Plus, I didn't think that the color of the leaves of the vinca would pop in this corner the same way that the creeping jenny does. The creeping jenny can also blossom given the right conditions, probably light and soil conditions, I'm guessing, and most likely water conditions. It has a nice yellow blossom to it. but I'm not too concerned if it doesn't blossom in this area. I just want this nice pop of color in this bed. And because I have so much creeping Jenny, I figured I might as well plant it pretty thickly in this area. But you will see I'm leaving some gaps. And the reason is over time, those gaps will fill in without a problem. When I was doing a little research about creeping Jenny and its application in the landscape, I specifically did a search on creeping Jenny and Blue Fescue to see if anyone else had done a similar type of landscaping design in their yard. And I did surprisingly find a few people that had done a similar type of design like this. And it looked good. I really liked the way it looked. And I highly suggest that if you're thinking of doing something in your landscape, you're not quite sure how it's going to look, or you're not quite sure what other plant would be a good companion with something like, for example, the creeping Jenny. The internet is your best friend. So definitely look out there. And if you find that someone else has done the same thing and you like the look of it, go for it. What happens with creeping Jenny is as it creeps along, like this piece right here, it's going to root itself as it just creeps in the ground. And then when it roots itself, it's going to keep going this way. It's going to come down this way. Boy, what a nice pop of color the creeping Jenny adds to this area. I've only done a small section so far, but the project has begun. So I'm going to go back to my raised vegetable garden and pull out some more creeping Jenny, and I'm going to show you how I go about dividing it and planting it. I dug out some more creeping Jenny from my vegetable garden, and I feel like this project is good in many ways. Number one, I'm getting my vegetable garden cleaned up finally. Number two, I'm doing a landscaping project in this dark side of my garden, which I think will look really pretty. And that's exciting because this is an area of my garden, pretty much this whole north side of my garden has been an area that's been, I want to say neglected, but it's just an area that I don't tend to spend a lot of time on. I think part of it's because it's my way backyard, and I tend to focus more on out front, along the front walkway, as well as on the side walkway where everyone exits and enters. But on the same token, when I'm mowing my lawn, or if someone comes over and we're walking around the yard, I always just don't even look at this section of my yard. Even when I do my garden tours, I tend to not even show this side of the yard. So I'm excited to finally be spending some time making it look better for me, and so I can enjoy it more. And also, I do have a lot of annuals to plant, and I was going to do that today instead of this project. But I have to tell you, we have a bluebird fledgling that is just learning to fly. It's not quite there yet. And mom and dad were not very happy with me when I was thinking about pulling out my ranunculus and planting a bunch of annuals in my raised beds, because that is a big project of mine, is to plant the rest of my annuals in that I started from seed. But that can wait. I can do that later on today. I can do that tomorrow. And hopefully by then that little baby fledgling will have figured it out. But until then, mom and dad are protecting it, and I think that's great. And there's always different projects in our yards that we can be doing, right? So that's why I'm tackling this one today. I also had a nice person come by and buy a bunch of this creeping Jenny. She wants to use it in her yard where she has a very sloped area. And that got me started with the digging out of the creeping Jenny from my garden, and motivated me to continue digging it out and putting it somewhere else in the yard. So here we are. What I'm doing when I'm planting the creeping Jenny is I'm basically making sure the roots are down at the bottom. Even if there's a little bit of green, it's fine. I want most of the green foliage to be up top. And I realize I have a ton of creeping Jenny. And if you wanted to do a project like this, perhaps you might not have this much. Maybe you just have one pot that you bought. Trust me when I say, once you plant it in your landscape, it will multiply very quickly. So do not fear. I think when I first bought my first amount of creeping Jenny, it was just one pot. And you literally can't get rid of it, which is not a bad thing, especially if you're using it in other applications like containers. I realize over time, especially because I am gardening here in the woodland area where the lawn ends and the woods start, I realize that weeds just come. It's part of gardening in general. It's definitely part of gardening when you're planting at the edge of the woods like I am. But I embrace that. I take it as a challenge. And that's one reason why I'm putting this ground cover in, is so that it can cover the ground and the weeds will be somewhat suppressed. I want to show you this piece right here. It has a bunch of roots to it. And what I can do is just break it apart, making sure that each piece or each section has a root. And as I do that, I'm just bunching them together and making sure that the roots fall down below my hand. There's another one like that. And another one. I know I say it all the time, but I really feel it's like making a bouquet of flowers. I don't know how else to explain it. So they're all bunched up like that. All right, let's wrap up this project. I'm going to finish planting all of the creeping Jenny, and I will show you what it looks like when I am all done with this. This project took me about a half a day, but keep in mind that included weeding part of my raised vegetable garden, which I'm very happy about. So that's a good thing. Let me show you how I made out with our Blue Fescue bed. I'm going to show you different angles of this bed so you can see from one side. I think it came out very nicely. Notice the color of the Blue Fescue next to the rocks. The rocks have like a little bit of a blue tinge or a hue to them, which I think looks really nice with that bluegrass. It's always nice to see a bed from different angles. So this is the other side of it. This is the back side of it, if you're looking from the woods out to my lawn. I'm really pleased with how this blue color and this lime green color are mixing together. 1 year from now, this is all going to be filled in. So stay tuned. I hope your gardens are coming alive like mine are. Until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.